Alan hated Luther. Hated him so much, he planned to kill him. But before we continue, I should point out that Luther was a cat. A fine black beast with penetrating green eyes, which he used to stare at Alan, much to Alan's discomfort. Alan was a librarian, and supposedly in charge of a large suburban branch. Luther was one of his employees, as in Chief Mouser and Assistant Pest Control Specialist. Not that Luther did much in the way of catching mice. Instead, he spent most of his time lolling around on the furniture or the circ desk, visiting older patrons and running away from the children, intent on mauling him. And in tormenting Alan, of course. Alan detested cats, and with the unerring instincts of his breed, Luther haunted him for the pleasure of getting under the librarian's skin. If Alan left the office, sometimes only for a moment, he would find Luther curled up on his chair and disinclined to budge. Then, once Alan had succeeded in removing him, he would jump up onto his desk, dislodge his papers, sprawl across the librarian's keyboard, and make a general nuisance of himself. It was just as bad outside of the office. Luther would follow Alan around, even following him to the washroom, where he would wait outside the door to resume shadowing when the librarian emerged. But his worst trick was to run between Alan's legs as he was walking up or down the stairs, making him stumble and on a few occasions actually fall down. "That thing is going to kill me someday," Alan would mutter in anger. But it was the fury of impotence, since everyone else, both staff and patrons, loved Luther and were very protective of him. "He's just trying to make friends," Alan's staff would say. But Alan wasn't fooled. He could see the malevolence lurking in Luther's kryptonite green eyes, and when they were alone, he would talk to it. "Come on, Luther, leave me alone," and then plead with it. "Why must you pester me so? Please, please leave me alone." But Luther would just stare at him, with the ghost of a feline smile, and Alan knew he was just going to have to live, or at least coexist with it, with Luther. But one cold winter evening, as Alan worked after hours, alone, Luther went too far. Alan was walking up the stairs between the main level and his office, a mug of freshly brewed coffee in hand, when Luther darted rapidly between his feet, causing him to stumble. The librarian narrowly avoided falling, but managed to pour boiling hot coffee all over the front of his shirt and all over the crotch of his trousers. "Ouch!" Sputtering and swearing, he stalked off to the washroom to clean himself off, while Luther made himself scarce. When Alan finally emerged, he headed for the basement, and when he returned, he had something in his hands. As for Luther, he was keeping Alan's office chair warm for him by sleeping on it. But he woke up when Alan came in and slammed the door shut behind him. The object Alan had in his hand looked like a small laundry bag with a string tie, one of the bags used by the children's librarians to hold picture books, puppets, etc. But this one ended up holding a particularly ornery, hissing, spitting black cat. Not that Luther went without a fight, and Alan had some vivid scratch marks on his face before he managed to tie the bag shut. The area had just experienced a real Canadian blizzard, and there were glacier-sized mountains of snow piled up along the sides of the roads. Alan, with his squirming captive by his side, drove through the snow-bound streets and eventually pulled to the side of a bridge spanning a partially frozen creek, where he calmly tossed the sack over the rail and down into the water, ice and snow. "That ought to take care of you," Alan said grimly. He then drove home, and that night he slept like a baby. The next day, the staff tore the library apart in their futile attempts to find Luther. One of the clerks asked Alan, "You don't think Luther got out, do you?" Alan shrugged. "Seems to me it had a good sense of self-preservation." Of course, the clerk noticed that Alan had referred to Luther in the past tense and called him an it. She had also noticed the scratch marks on his face, but said nothing. Alan, after all, was technically the boss. But tongues wagged in the staff room, and the patrons were sad, especially the children. The library's art gallery decided to help the situation by hanging a huge painting of a black cat with emerald green eyes on the wall of the main floor directly across from the circ desk. Everybody loved it. Everybody but Alan, for the cat's eyes seemed to follow him everywhere. "That picture looks just like Luther, doesn't it, Alan?" gushed one of the clerks. "It's like he's come back to us." Alan admitted the resemblance and inwardly shuddered. And a week later, the black cat returned, in the form of a stuffed animal. It was a large, plush black cat with green button eyes, a pink nose, and a curvy pink smile. Around its throat, it wore a small placard which said, "The cat came back." It was sitting on a chair in Alan's office, and when he came in and turned on the lights, he barely suppressed a scream. The damn thing looked just like Luther. When he confronted the staff, they professed complete ignorance of the stuffed toy, which they promptly dubbed Luther, and about where it came from. "Maybe the children's department sent it to us," they suggested, "since they know how most of us miss Luther." But the children's department hadn't sent it. The staff quickly installed it at the circ desk for everyone to admire, but that didn't stop it from following Alan around like some kind of weird voodoo fetish. The voodoo Luther was always ending up in Alan's office, on his chair, his desk, his keyboard, or in the staff room, sitting on the table across from him when he went to eat, and also on the stairs. He tried to keep it from getting on his nerves, but it did, so he chastised the staff about it during one of their regular meetings. "I wish you guys would stop putting that thing where I can trip over it. It's always in my office, in the staff room, even on the stairs." "But Alan," one of the clerks protested, "Luther never leaves the circ desk." The rest nodded in agreement and looked at each other, a look which said, "He's losing it." Maybe he was. When he calmed down, Alan had to admit that Luther only appeared on the stairs when he was alone in the building, so no one else could have put it there. The damn thing couldn't move by itself, could it? Could it? Could it? Alan had to work alone in the library from time to time, and that's when things began to get weird. When he found Luther on the stairs, he would return it to the circ desk, and a few minutes later, it would be back on the steps. Alan would lock it in a closet downstairs or throw it in the dumpster outside. But in a few minutes, it would be back on the stairs again. It got worse. Alan didn't bother to turn on all the lights when he was alone in the building, and as he worked in his office, he was always hearing faint sounds or seeing things out of the corner of his eye. But when he stopped to look, there was nothing there. And when he stopped to listen, dead silence. At first. But one night, he became aware of a faint but steady sound. So soft and distant, he thought it was just the wind outside the building. But it became louder and clearer, and he recognized it as the mewing of a cat. Alan tried to ignore it at first, telling himself it was outside and no concern of his, particularly if it was some damn cat. But the noise kept increasing, and he began to wonder if it was coming from somewhere inside. And then he thought, was it Luther? Had Luther come back? Alan couldn't take it anymore and began to frantically search the building. But racing from his office, he almost tripped over the toy Luther, which would have caused him to fall down the stairs and break his neck. He booted the stuffy in anger, causing it to fly through the air and crash somewhere in the stacks, while the black cat in the humongous painting regarded him with baleful and reproachful eyes. Alan explored all 3 floors, the main floor, the office floor, and the basement, and found nothing. But he could still hear it, and could still sense movement all around him, black things darting past him, just out of sight. He gave up and went to a nearby bar for a pint to calm his nerves. Or 2 pints. Or 3. And he was muttering to himself by the time he got home. God damn that Luther. Is he still alive and come back? I should have done what that guy did to that one-eyed cat in that Poe story. The black cat. I should have hanged it. I should have hanged it. Hang it, I should have hanged it. And with that regret, Alan lay down on his bed, fully dressed, and fell sound asleep. When he awoke, he found himself in darkness, save for the light from a few tall green candles. But in spite of the gloom, he recognized his surroundings, the large meeting room in his library. Alan wasn't alone. The room was filled with large black cats, all sitting and staring at him, some on chairs, some on tables, and some on the floor, eyes yellow and green, with the occasional eyes of blue. Dead silence. But Alan knew instinctively that this was a trial, and that he was the accused, and that the charge was murder. A ripple of movement ran through the assembled felines, and suddenly a half-starved beast, as white as it was black, limped up onto the table and raised an injured paw, pointing directly at Alan. It was Luther. Alan wouldn't have recognized it. It was so different from the sleek, well-fed cat which had been his nemesis. And he wasn't sure if it was alive or if he was looking at a ghost. But he did know the raised paw was both an accusation and a sentence. Death. The clouder, the court of black cats, began to move towards him, forcing him out the door of the meeting room and across the floor to the head of the stairs, where a noose hung down from an overhead beam. Alan turned to see Luther on a step at the bottom of the stairs. Once again, Luther raised his damaged paw, and the noose fell around the librarian's neck. And then Luther's paw dropped. Something struck Alan on the back of the neck, and he felt like he was falling. When staff arrived the following morning, they found Alan's body at the foot of the stairs. His neck was broken, a fact which puzzled the chief medical officer who performed the autopsy. Falling down the short flight of stairs should have resulted, at most, in a broken arm. But then, he was also puzzled by what looked like rope burns around Alan's neck. The branch was closed for several days, and staff were given access to counseling, but they recovered rather quickly. And the day after reopening, Luther returned. He was outside the main door when staff came in the morning, his frost-damaged fur more white than black. He was missing one of his green eyes, and his sinister paw was frostbitten. But it was definitely Luther, and he was soon safely terrorizing the new librarian, Lisa, who liked cats and wasn't bothered by his attentions or his intentions. So, should you ever have occasion to visit this particular, and perhaps accursed, library branch, you will find both Luther and his plush mannequin regally installed at the circulation desk, unless he's in Lisa's office, trying to bug her. And be sure to check out the colossal painting of the black cat with the kryptonite eyes. And if you look at the lower left-hand corner, you'll see some vandal has scratched a little symbol into the paint. Ever play hangman? That symbol. A hanged man. If this is your first visit to my channel, my name is Warren, and I write and tell original ghost stories, and original ghost stories of a librarian, and original horror stories featuring cryptids such as the night floaters, werewolves, and black-eyed children. So I hope you will consider subscribing. That would be the cat's meow. Till midnight. Cheers.